Everyone, we're starting a new series today. Hopefully we'll see how long it goes on for, how consistent I can upload these lectures. We're going to title it, think of different titles, Freestyle Torah, because the idea is I'm just going to freestyle it. The lectures, which I have planned, take a long time to prepare, and I end up just not doing them because it takes too long. So I thought, well, why don't we just freestyle it? We'll go through the different chapters of the Torah, starting with Breishis, Genesis chapter 1, and we'll see how far we go. And I'm going to try keeping them short, so I've got a bit of a timer, so the lectures won't go on so long, so it'll be much easier to hear. There'll be more ideas. It won't be focused around one central idea. Probably we'll take different ideas. The basic meaning might go into some obviously some of the deeper meanings. Otherwise, you could just read it yourself. Different commentaries and bring out some nice ideas. And if you've been following this channel for a long time, then you'll see that you'll hear in between the lines of what I'm saying here some of the richer ideas which we've touched upon. So let's get straight into it. So we'll start with Breishis. I'm going to try doing it for those Jewish people there. You know that each week we have a Torah portion we read. So we're going to start with Breishis. I'm not sure if we're going to do the whole of Breishis, which is basically chapter 1 to chapter 5 approximately of Genesis. I'm not sure we're going to do that in one sitting because I'm going to try keeping it to 30 to 35 minutes. So let's bring up the Genesis chapter 1. Okay, so as you see, we've got Rashi's commentary. If people want to know, this is the Chabad.org site. Just type in the Google Torah online. It leads you to this one. I couldn't find any other online Tanakh, a Jewish version anyway, with the translations in. So we use this one. We usually use this one. Okay, so we start off with the first verse in the Torah, Breishis bara Elokim es hashamayim beis haaretz. In the beginning of God's creation, already they're incorporating Rashi's explanation. In the beginning of God's creation of the heavens of the earth, and the earth was empty, etc. Right, the land was tohu vavohu. These words here, tohu vavohu, Rashi explains, tohu is an expression of astonishment, desolation. The idea is the idea that the Ramban, the Nachmanides, explains that tohu is referring to some sort of point of where everything is contained within that one point or that reality, and everything comes out of there. So if you think of it like plasticine or something like that, or in the more technical terms, it's chomer or material substance, but it has no definition at all. So if you can imagine water as a classic example, it doesn't have a shape, it doesn't have a flavor, anything like that. It's just raw material. It's just potential. Potential is a very good way to describe this. The world was basically potential, and darkness on top of the deep waters. The Spirit of God was hovering over the water. And then you have and then God said, let there be light, and there was light. So you see, there's 3 stages here. If we go back to actually the first verse again, so according to this way of reading the verses, it means the beginning of God's creation of heavens and earth, and the earth was desolate, and there was any definition to it, according to that way of reading it. And the Spirit of God was sort of hovering, waiting to do its first thing. And then the first thing which actually happens is the creation of light. Right? It's very interesting. We know in science the idea of the Big Bang, as they call it, which is another word of saying the point of creation where things start. We call it yesh ma'ayin, ex nihilo, which means something from nothing. That means there was, from our point of view, because we can't perceive God himself, we only perceive it through those revelations he gives to us. And remember, revelations is synonymous with light. Light is the way that things are revealed, physically even, right? In the physical world, you can't see me if there isn't any light coming from me to you, right? It's a bit more complicated if you're watching this on a computer. There's a whole system of links and lights, sort of. You got my light into the camera, then the camera into the digital transforms it and it produces more light, so you can see it off the screen you're watching me at. So the first thing in creation, right, is essentially light. It's the revelation. The first thing which we know is God being revealed. That means before creation, if you can even speak about before, because remember we're talking about the creation of time itself. Breishis, also according to the Sephorno, another commentary, is the creation of time. Breishis Barakim, Breishis, God created Reishis, the beginning of, the concept of the beginning of. What is anything the beginning of? The beginning of a process which carries on after the beginning, right? So it's the beginning of a plan. That's what God creates the world for, his plan. We know ultimately the final point of the plan is for us to be there with God and experiencing his immenseness and the pleasure of being close to God, right? As we explained in the very first lecture, right? So we have Breishis, meaning the creation of time. It's also the beginning of all material, the creation of material. This is where we diverge from the Greek. I think it was Plato. He understands creation, obviously not Jewish at all, very antithetical, very heretical. We would call this a heretical belief. It's the fourth of the 13 fundamentals of Judaism. We spoke about this in our very second lecture about who is or what is God, right? We went through those first four fundamental beliefs of Judaism, which everything stands on, right? God being the creator, but God being not more than one, being indivisible, God not having any physical manifestation at all. He's beyond definition. That means he's not anything which has got definition is something which is bound, right? Limited in some way, right? Otherwise, like we're saying here, when God created the world, there was an element of unboundedness of that original creation. This hiuli, this formless substance, which just, you couldn't, as Rashi says, a person looks at it, where is it? And just read this expression of astonishment that a person wonders and is astonished at the emptiness therein, because you just can't. You're trying to say, what is that? It's you just get stuck for words because there's no hook where you can start to describe it, because there's no definition. There's nothing tangible about it, right? From this primordial substance, then God brings out the other 9 elements of creation. The first one being light, the second one being the firmament. We'll speak about that in a minute. Okay, so anyway, so the first fundamental is God is the creator. That's Breishis. That's what we just did in the first verse. Second one, he's one. The third one, he's beyond corporeality, beyond any physical, any definition at all. The fourth one is he's before time. That means he transcends time. That means time is his creation. He creates the concept of time. That means he creates the concept of a beginning, which means that he transcends processes, which means God is outside time, space, that's the third one, and time, right? So the Greeks, especially Plato, I think he said he said he and the other Greek philosophers understand the world was always there. We spoke about this another time, because they have the mindset that only the human mind is brilliant, right? And only things which we can understand are real. Okay? Right, so that is a very arrogant way of looking at things. There is some rationale behind that, because things which we can't perceive at all, well, for all intents and purposes, we might as well just ignore, because it doesn't have any relevance to our lives. But it's not true, though. Yeah, we can acknowledge something which we are aware that we can't perceive. And the only thing in that category would ultimately be God, or maybe things which are other things which are not accessible by our 5 senses. right? But anyway, the idea is that even they call this original substance, Hiuli or whatever it is, it's a Greek word, where everything comes from. And that would be very similar to the Big Bang theory, where there was a point where things started, which comports very nicely with the Torah's explanation, especially with the Ramban, Nachmanides, about that original unformed substance, which starts from a point. As the Ramban says that as well. Incredible, exactly how the Big Bang is described. Things out of nowhere, time started. Because remember, with the theory of relativity, time is not an absolute. Time is just a function of time, space work together in reality. I mean, it's not just the physical world was expanding from the Big Bang. It's time itself was developing. That means you go back to one point, time was created just like the physical world was created. Or at the original point of creation, or what they call the Big Bang, they had time was maybe infinitely slow, or I can't remember exactly how it works, infinitely faster. Yeah, I've just got to go over my theory of relativity there. I haven't done it in a while, but that's the idea. Right, so everything starts with a point, and that point contains everything which is going to be in the universe later. I mean, this is the universe at this point. When it expands, the space of universe expands with it. It's dark matter, dark energy. That could be referred to in the verses here as v'choshech hapanei sehom. Yeah, everything was emptiness and void. That's the idea of the formless material, v'choshech hapanei, v'choshech, darkness, maybe dark matter. That's the thing which actually creates space itself, right, for things to exist within. Hapanei sehom. I'm not sure what that could be referring to in terms of science. Sehom, the waters. Yeah. Anyway, but it's all theoretical, this anyway. But yeah, we see the different ideas of the Big Bang paralleling very nicely into the words of the Torah here, right? But the Greek philosophers believed there was a primordial substance, and everything was then developed and sort of evolved from that. Yeah, the way we say it is that they're missing the stage before stage one, which is there is a nothingness, and that primordial substance was brought into being by a truly transcendent creator, right? Where he's above any definitions, above any concepts, right? So, and that's how the scientists describe it. Before the Big Bang, we just don't know. So we call it Yesh Ma'ayin, something from nothing. Not because there's nothing, because God is nothing, but from our level of consciousness, we don't have any way of describing God or understanding God at all. He's totally above concepts, so therefore, since we only use concepts to understand anything, so therefore by definition you can't understand God. So therefore we just call it nothingness, because when our mind travels to that level of reality, it just goes blank and it's nothingness. So that's why we call it Yesh Ma'ayin, something from nothing, right? And this is what's going on here in the Breishis. So on one level, the beginning of the creation, there was just this nothingness. God created a something, right? There was some sort of material or time itself, or if you look at Rashi later on, he says that it's referring to the purpose of creation, which is, let me find it, it's quite long. I don't think it says it in this version. Interesting, because there's some versions of Rashi which miss out certain bits. Okay, that's interesting. All right, it says the purpose of the world, which is in order for the Torah and the Jewish people, the whole of mankind is essentially meant to be Yisrael. Yeah, we spoke about there's a split. Got two aspects of mankind now. There's a purpose to the world. So the very first thing God creates is a purpose to the world. It's time itself. the matter and material from what time and space are going to expand from, right? It's nothing of our place home is the deep waters. The idea of water is also something which is formless. But God's spirit is hovering over, and then it says, "Let there be light," and light is the first thing. Well, the Big Bang is basically the idea of Einstein's idea. Well, not only his idea, but the idea of E equals mc squared. That's his famous formula. Energy is equivalent to matter. Just a small amount of matter is a huge amount of energy, right? So m times a huge number called c squared. Yes, you've got a tiny amount of matter, but you multiply it by c squared, you get a huge amount of energy. Okay? So the idea is that originally everything was just light, and light is something which is formless. It's something that just is, right? You shine light on an object, then it takes the qualities of the object, then you can see definition, you can see different colors, different shapes. But the first visible creation, the first yesh mayim, the somethingness is that light. Light is the first thing we get from that unfathomable potential, right? So that's, I think I've seen put side by side some sort of diagram of the different stages of the Big Bang, like a millionth of a second after the Big Bang, and then the next hundredth of a second. I can't remember exactly. This idea there's a total darkness, nothingness, then suddenly you get something, right? And then you get a lot of light, and the light quickly crystallizes. It's all energy, and then it starts to crystallize into hydrogen into subatomic particles, then atoms. You've got hydrogen and helium, like we have in the sun, right? So you've got a huge amount of energy, but you're starting to get the formation of physical things. That's light, though. That's what light is. Light is all of matter is basically light, just condensed into this crushed energy, formed into a physical thing. So now you're giving form to the light. So it's very nice ideas there with the Breishis. So first of all, God creates the heavens and the earth. According to one explanation, according to this other explanation here, it's the beginning of the creation of the heavens and the earth. Then God created light. Whichever way you want to describe it, it's fine. Let's carry on. Right? And we see a process here. Right? We see a process that there's a start to the world. Right? Then there's a darkness phase. Right? And then God brings in light. So that parallels very much an idea, fundamental idea, which we've mentioned on this channel many times. In fact, it's lecture number 3. So we've mentioned all 3 of them straight away, all 3 keystone lectures. As usual, those keystone lectures go into everything in Judaism. The keystone number 3 is what's the purpose of creation. As we know, very quickly, the purpose of creation. Look at those keystone lectures for the more thorough explanation. Is God creates the world with the intention to do good, right? That's creation itself. Olam Chesed Yibon, the world's created with Chesed, kindness, right? But then the best form of kindness is one which we earn it, because it's one where we become the it's not something given to us anymore. It's the pleasure which God wants to give to us. It's not being given to us. It's we've earned it. We've become the holders of that pleasure. That means we become like God. So God creates us in His image. That was later on in this chapter, right? So we've got very similar faculties to God, right? And when we talk about God, we talk about the way God reveals Himself to us, as opposed to that essence God. The essence aspect of God which we don't know about, which is before creation, because we can only know things which we have which are revealed to us, right? So, and that's only through light. So in Kabbalah it's called the Or Ein Sof, the light of the Ein Sof, the infinite one, right? So that's how we perceive God, and we spoke about in the Kabbalah lecture number 2, where we went into Kabbalah itself. There's the idea of all the worlds are essentially basically, and all the Sephiros are basically different ways that God communicates with us. We mentioned in, I think, one of the Passover lectures, I think it was, we had the 10 makkos, the 10 plagues correspond to the 10 sayings that we see here. And it says 10 times, Vayomer Elokim, God said, it says over here, verse 6, Vayomer Elokim, he said, he creates a second thing. Then we got Vayomer Elokim again on the third day. Each day it's God saying something, which means he's expressing, revealing another aspect of that original formless entity called substance of the universe, or the starting point of, or the Hiyuli, the substance of all of creation, right? He's bringing different aspects out. He's forming it. He's giving form. Yep. So the ultimate goodness is something which we earn, and something which we earn has to be something which we gain through our free will, because you can't earn by pressing a button and the robot earns his reward. It doesn't have any free choice. That's not called earning. Yeah, we have to be the ones to earn it, because we've got to be like God, and God doesn't have to create the world. God chose to do good and create the world is a pure free choice, which is mind-boggling. That means if God would just decide not to create the world, then there wouldn't be any time, space, nothing. There would just be God. Nothing, just God, right? Which is mind-boggling. We can't even think about what that means, right? But he somehow created us, which is amazing, amazing kindness. She chose to do so. Because he chose, we have to be able to choose as well, because we've got to be similar to God in all respects, at least those respects which he reveals to us of himself, right? So he reveals himself as the creator. So we've got to be creative. We've got to create our own destiny, right? By bringing the infinite light of God into ourselves. Therefore, we take our finite bodies and make them infinite. So that's a type of creation. Yeah, something which wasn't there before, i.e. the infinite living body. We are creating that. And we're doing it because we're earning it. Now, earning can only be if we have free will, and obviously we can have free will if there's a genuine choice to choose bad. So therefore God uses the name Elokim, which is Midas Hadin, the attribute of justice, where God holds himself back and there's, so to speak, darkness, right, where we don't perceive God's reality. And now we've got free choice. Are we going to admit that our reality is is not a real reality to compete with God's reality? Or do we say, yeah, well, God, yeah, but now he's created us, we are something. I mean, who's saying there's nothing about God? It's me, right? That was Adam's test. One way of looking at it. So, lots of ideas. This is freestyle. So many ideas. You see what's really in my head. You can see it's hard to get it all out. Just jumping around everywhere. Yeah. Just trying to make sure everything's traced back to the original point. Yeah. So God creates, first of all, he makes creation, chesed, kindness, right? That's the first of the three primary sephiros, which is chesed, kindness, gevura, strict justice, and tiferes, which means balance or beauty, right? Right. So chesed, he just creates the world. Olim chesed yibon, as it says in the verse in Psalms, the world's created with kindness. But then when he actually technically brings the world into being, he uses the name Elokim, right? Elokim is the name of God which represents justice and harshness, right? You only get what you deserve. You've got to use your free will to earn your reward, right? And this world is a world where God's hidden, right? God formed the world in such a way where he hides behind creation. And then finally, the idea is that through our free will, then God's light will be revealed. Okay? And that's the first three verses of the Torah. So let's have a look at them. Right? That we reveal God through the darkness. right? Breishis bara Elokim es Hashemayim v'ha'aretz. In the beginning, God created the heaven and earth, right? That's the first stage. That's the kindness to create the world, right? He just wants to do good to another being, which is mankind. But then, technically, how does he actually do it? That is hinted to over here with the choshech, with the darkness. Things are without form, without definition, right? We don't know. There's confusion, right? And then God actually brings the light in practically. That's a more metaphysical way of reading the verses, as opposed to just the straightforward way. God, at the beginning, God created the world, right? The general, the formless aspect of the world, the chomer, the clay, the plasticine, the water, whatever you want to call it, and then he started molding that, and the first thing he brought out from that was light. Or you could look at it on a conceptual level. So different ways of understanding Torah. There's as it says, Shivim Panana Torah. There's 70 ways of looking at the Torah. In fact, there's more than that. Each Jewish person's got their own chelik of Torah, their own aspects of Torah, which they can bring out. Everyone's got unique aspects. Okay, then we carry on. And there's a Vayar Elokim Tzorah Ki Tov, Vayavdel Elokim Ben Orah Ben Choshech. I think we mentioned this in our previous lecture, actually. God saw the light was good, and He separated it. He separated between the light and the dark. And Rashi explains that the light and the darkness, God saw that this light is actually not physical light. It's actually what lies behind physical light, which is spiritual light, which is the light of the world to come. Right? Which ties in what we said before. It's God's light, the way He expresses and He reveals Himself to us. And then He separates it, as it says here. He said it was too good for the wicked to use it, so He separated it. Right? Sorry, I just got a phone call there. Yes, where was I up to? Right, right. So God saw that this is the light which is inside of the natural light which we have. It's a spiritual light. It's the light of the world to come. The light which God reveals Himself to us, essentially. And He says, different ways of understanding these Rashis here. Read it through yourself. He saw it was good, and it's not good for the darkness and light to be together. So he separated them out. Right, and He called the light day, and the darkness called night. And there was evening, there was morning, Yom Echad. And very interesting Rashi says here. Why does it say Yom Echad, one day, and not Yom Rishon, the first day? Is because on that day, God was one. That means if theoretically we would be standing there, whatever that means, on the first day of creation, we recognize that despite the fact that God's made all these different things, darkness, light, you've got the things mentioned in the second verse, the tohu, the formless thing, the darkness, the deep waters, the Spirit of God, right, on the face of the water, all these things. You would realize that this wouldn't be a contradiction to the idea of God's being one, right? So I was speaking earlier about the third lecture on the channel, which is about the ultimate purpose of creation is for God to give to us, but the way we do it is by recognizing the truth of God. Our reward is recognizing the truth of God. That is what the pleasure of the world to come is experiencing the truth of God. And the truth of God is that ultimately there's nothing except God. What are we? We don't understand quite what we are, but we know God created us with something, right? And from our point of view, we are real, but ultimately there is a reality which transcends this, where God hasn't even changed at all since creation. And on one level, our creation, our existence is kind of, it's like you've got a source of heat, and you've got an object which is not hot, but the heater can heat up the object, right? So the object takes on some of the properties of heat, the heat source, right? But it isn't heat itself. This is heat. This gets hot. Same thing with God. God is the only real existence, and creation just expands and expresses somehow that quality called existence to something else, and then the thing ends up existing. Yeah, it takes on the quality of existence, right? But it's not existence itself. Right? This is all to do with the first of the 13 fundamentals about God being the creator, but he's the only real reality. What it means, so in our dimension, we exist, other people exist just as much as we do. But when we compare ourselves to God, God is the only true creation. And the trick of creation, the genius of it, is by us keeping the Torah and the mitzvahs, we're transforming ourselves into, as much as possible, to be similar to that thing which is intrinsically existing. So just like something which is existence, it can't decide not to exist. Yeah, the famous question, can God make himself smaller? Can God change, right? Yeah, can God lose his infinitelessness? Yeah, even temporarily, he can't, because the definition, according to our understanding, which there's nothing else to go on, is that God is totally transcendent. God's existence is not contingent on anything, and it's not influenced by anything. So therefore, God cannot change. Right? What is creation? Somehow God did something, whatever the word did mean. Right? The word did doesn't make sense to us, because did implies there is an action being done, and action implies that there's an actor who is making a change in himself. If I'm just static totally the whole time, then nothing will be done, right? For me to produce an action, there has to be a change in me. So, but when we speak about God, we can't speak about any action, right? That's only after creation starts, so we don't understand God at all. But anyway, for what we can understand of God is that he reveals himself as a being which is intrinsic existence. That's, in other words, that's saying something whose existence is permanent. So therefore, our job is to make ourselves permanent, and by bringing God's reality, that heat source, that reality source into us, we become more real, and we actually take on the qualities of permanent existence. That's the idea. With the world to come, we live forever. Yeah, we exist forever, and we become even more infinite, because it's the process of getting even closer to God, like the asymptote on the graph. We get closer and closer, but we never quite touch. Right? So it's absolute ecstatic pleasure there of just feeling infinite and feeling like more and more what it's like to be God, which is amazing. Right? Because we have actually created that reality through our free will. Right? But this is what's happening on the first day. The first day, God is one. Yeah, it says Yom Echad. God is one. That means we will be able to realize that despite the fact that we have a separate existence from God, seemingly, we'll realize, no, I understand now. It's something much deeper, right? For some reason, our existence is not a contradiction to the one unknowable God, somehow. Right? And the whole process of the world to come is bridging that gap and revealing different ways of understanding this amazing paradoxical idea that on one hand God is the only creation, but yet other beings can exist and somehow don't contradict that one creation. Right? That's the idea that we spoke about in the third lecture. Right? And that is the pleasure of the world to come. The pleasure of the world to come is us experiencing the truth of God, which is this aspect that there's nothing besides God. Right? So that's the three stages. God creates, kindness, right? He gives us free will, that's the darkness. And then he brings in light, that's the revelation of God's light to us, but that's only revealed through us. Right? And ultimately the first day is a microcosm of the whole of creation, right? And eventually you've got the Oragonas, the final light, where Yom Echad, it's one day. That means the reality is just a oneness, right? The Vilna Gaon says an amazing idea. He says the whole of creation is found in the Torah, right? That makes sense for us anyway on this channel. We've spoken about this idea, about the idea of the two levels of the spiritual dimension, the physical one. The physical dimension is just a crystallization of sorts of the spiritual dimension, right? Just like you have ice, yeah, really, it's a more congealed, more condensed, more crystallized version of water, which is much more formless, right? It's got more, and then steam is even more formless than that. Ultimately, you get to plasma. Plasma is when you superheat steam, then the molecules break up into atoms. Yeah, maybe even more. You get fission, even, right? Right. So you could say that corresponds to the four levels of the four fundamental elements, not the way we describe elements of fire, air, water, and earth. Yeah, the earth could be the physical solids, water is liquids, air is gases, and fire is plasma, just energy itself. And that corresponds to the four things which we see in the second verse here, as the rabbis point out. The land was tohu, that's one thing, vavohu, whatever that means, right? V'choshech, darkness, and alpanesohim, on the face of the deep. The rabbis say these correspond to the four exiles, they say, right? And then Baruch Elokim Rachefes Apnei Moim, the Spirit of God is hovering on the waters. That's the idea of the Spirit of the Mashiach, which brings the redemption in the end, right? That's the idea of hovering, just waiting for it to come. Very interesting. So also the idea of the four, these, I think the Ramban Nachmandi says that it corresponds to the four elements. I can't remember how he does it. Tohu, maybe one, it mentions Mayim, it mentions water as one. Ruach Elokim, the spirit. Ruach can also mean the wind. Okay, yeah, I have to look in Nachmanides there for the details. But anyway, we've got all the different elements of creation here, and right, and on that, yeah. So what we're saying, we say that the Vilna Gaon says that the whole of creation is just is an expression of the Torah being the spiritual blueprint of the world. But he says this, that the whole Torah can be contained in the first 7 days of creation, which is Genesis chapter 1 and chapter 2, the first three verses there. I'm not sure why they made it a second chapter there. It's a bit silly of the non-Jewish printers to say, okay, well, this is where we start chapter 2. Just have to wait 3 more verses, then it would have made more sense. Because the way we have our chapters is not a Jewish idea. The Jewish one goes by either paragraphs or we go by sedras. Breishis would be chapters 1 to 5 plus a bit of chapter 6, I think. Okay. Right, so I think we'll stop here. Right, let's just finish off what the Vilna Gaon says. So he says the whole of the Torah can be, you can see them in condensed form. The roots of the whole Torah are actually contained in the 7 days of creation. And he says they're all contained in the first day of creation. Is that beautiful? Right? Everything's contained in the first day of creation. So as I've showed you here, right, these 5 verses, let's just hide the Rashi. Right, here we go. Yeah, there's a beginning to the world. The process, there's darkness, God hides himself. Then there's light that brings the light. God's forming the world to come, the light of the world to come. That's the purpose of creation. And then he separates them out, and now everything's in place for us to earn the reward. But yet, at the same time, God is still one, because day one, it doesn't say the first day, like it says one day here. Here it says second day. Here it says third day. Doesn't say first day here. Doesn't say Yom Rishon. It says Yom Echad, day one, or one day. The idea of just God being one. Maybe that's the end of creation. That's when everything comes to its climax. After all the things God created, at the end of the day, it's just one God. And that is the world to come. Very nice. Okay, so we actually only got through the first day, right? And, well, I have to tell you what else the Vilna says. He says it's all contained in the first verse. If you know how to really read this verse, these 7 words, Breishis bara Elokim es Hashemayim v'haaretz, in the beginning God created, or the beginning of, literally in the beginning of, and doesn't say of what, Bara Elokim, God created, es Hashemayim, the heavens, v'es haaretz, and the earth. We mentioned this in the Kabbalah lecture. This is the name of God, Yud Kei Vav Kei, the Tetragrammaton. Heavens is referring to the Yud. Es means something which is secondary to the heavens. Then you've got the Oretz, which is the land, and then you've got the Eis Ha'oretz, the thing which is secondary to the land. So you've got the Yud, and what's the thing which is secondary to the Yud would be the Hey. Hey is the letter of revelation, so the secondary thing reveals the first thing. So you've got the Yud and the Hey, and then you've got again the Vov corresponds to the earth, and the children, or the revelation, or the expression of the Vov will be the final Hey of God's name, right? For those who don't know what I'm talking about, this is God's name. It only happens the first time. It's in verse 4 here. This is the Tetragrammaton. This is what I'm talking about. The Yud is that very small letter. Then you got the Hey. Then the Vov is the longer one, and then you got a Hey again, right? So if you know how to read, not just read and translate, you know the different mystical ideas behind creation itself and behind the wisdom of the Torah, you'll be able to see everything in that first verse of Breishis. And he goes further, everything's contained in the first word. The word Breishis itself contains everything. Very interesting story. Someone challenged him, right? Where do you see, I can't remember the story exactly. There's a few stories of the Vilna Gaon about the first word in Torah, right? All the mitzvahs, all the commandments in the Torah, there's one mitzvah, one commandment, which is pidyon haben. The person has a firstborn son, he has to redeem it for 5 saloim, 5 type of coins of silver, right? So if you have a look in Hebrew, he says that is hinted to in this word, Breishis, right? Ben Rishon. So if you're taking imagine this is what's it called when you've got the not an anagram. What's it called? Yes, it's an acronym. An acronym of. Yes, I've just looked it up. Explain to me exactly what an acronym is there in the what's it called? Let's get back to this. Right. So it's an acronym of the mitzvah of pidyon haben, where a person has to redeem his firstborn son. So the acronym will go like this: Base is ben, a son; Rishon, first; Achar, shloshim yom, after 30 days. That's a yud yom. Tipoda, he should be redeemed, or tifta, you shall redeem him. So you see that everything's contained in the very first word of Breishis. Amazing. And the Vilna Gaon doesn't finish there. And he says, I think this is in his Pirush of Sifra D'Tznius, a very deep Kabbalistic work, a very ancient one. And he says everything is contained in the base of Breishis. The first letter of the Torah contains everything. You look in the Sefer Torah, it's actually much bigger than the other letters. It's like, it stands out to you, Breishis, base, right? You can already start to see maybe how you can get that. So base is the number 2. It's the idea of the 3-sided letter where it's open, the world. God hides himself as he's facing into the world. I'll show you visually there. Yeah, you look at the base here. Ignore the dots below and inside of it. Or you got a base here by itself here. This is verse 2. There's a base here. You can see it's got a line here, here, and here, but it's open on the side which faces into the world. saying that God, like the ink representing reality, below, before, and above, it's all God. But going into the world, that's where God hides. That's why it's the number 2. Base is the number 2, right? Because now there's 2. There's a possibility for something else to exist besides God, right? So just a couple of ideas there about how you could see the whole creation being condensed into the letter base. And then he says the crown on top of the letter base. If you look in the Sefer Torah, it's got a crown on top, and it's got like a little Vav shape. That's the idea of maybe the connection to above. Ultimately, that crown, if you understand what the crown is, you can expand it to the base. You can expand it to the word Breishis. You can expand it to the first verse. You can expand it to the first day, and you can expand the first day to the whole 7 days, because all of the 7 days are contained, hidden in the first day. And then you can expand the whole Torah, and then you can expand it to the whole creation. So if you are really, really clever, it's not just clever. It's if you have some sort of level of prophecy, but not any prophecy. This is mind-boggling. Yeah, this is like world to come level sort of perception. You can see everything in that Vov on top of the first letter of the base of Breishis. Incredible. That's what the Vilna says. And yeah, so yeah, I knew this first day would take longer than the other one, so hopefully we'll go through the rest of creation in the second lecture, and maybe we'll finish off the Parshas Breishis. We'll do the next 4 chapters and a bit until the end of the Parsha, the Torah reading in the following one. So we're a bit behind. We're already in the 3rd Seder of the year. Breishis obviously being the first one, so we'll try catching up. And I hope you enjoyed that. A bit of a different, more freer, sort of just seeing my ideas spill out, just grabbing ones which come to mind at the time. Which I feel much more comfortable doing, because it's like I'm having a chat with you, sort of. I wish someone would come and talk to me, and then I could show how I think through things when I'm actually talking, explaining to someone. So if you've got any volunteers who want to do like some sort of podcast with me, please tell me. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed that, and I'll see you in the next lecture. Bye for now.